All right, I finished this job already, so I just want to do a bit of a recap for the beginning of this. So we are replacing in this job the power steering pump, which is literally buried in the back of the engine. It's the hardest component to replace. If you've done the water pump or the alternator or the AC, this is actually quite a bit more challenging because it's so hard to get to. So it could be frustrating, so just bear that in mind. Once you take a look at it, you might want to actually take this to a mechanic because it really is a pain. So basically the setup is we've got the way this works is you've got the power steering pump in the back, and it's connected to the power steering reservoir over here by two hoses. One is a big fat low pressure hose, and one is a high pressure hose which comes off there into the pump, and that circulates. And then the Serpentine Belt, which is down there, that winds through this side of the engine, and it pressurizes the power steering fluid in the power steering pump, and that helps you turn the car without really trying too hard. If you've experienced a whine in your motor, chances are it's the power steering pump, but I'll caution you that before replacing the pump, try replacing the reservoir only. There's a filter in there, and if the filter becomes clogged, and it does get clogged, then that restricts flow of the fluid into the pump, and that causes the pump to scream and whine because it's not getting the fluid it needs to do its job. So do that first and see what you get. If there's still a persistent whine from the pump, then perhaps the bearing is bad or something, and you do need to replace the pump. So the process is basically we're going to drain the reservoir, and I've got a video on replacing the reservoir. I'll attach that separately because it's lengthy as well. But basically, drain the fluid as much as you can. Watch my video to see how to do that. I can get all the fluid out. So drain that out, and then you remove the air box over here. Remove all the components around here as best as you can, so you can get a good shot at the pump. There are multiple ways of getting at the pump. I went directly at it because I had my AC system, which needs work. I had it cleared professionally, and then I was able to take the AC filter dryer from out back, take it out, and then I get perfect access to this power steering pump. If you can't do that, you could maybe get in there with some luck and some time to get a wrench onto some of the bolts that keep the power steering. There's 3 bolts that keep it attached onto a bracket. If you can't do that, the Haynes manual recommends that you take the cowl off, which involves taking off the the wiper arms, and then removing this whole fixture so you can come in from the top. I imagine that would work. Or you can come up with from the bottom, from behind. That's I think really not going to work to get the bolts off. I think you've got to come in from the top, or do what I did, which is coming in from the side via the AC filter. So then what you do then, you remove or detach the 2 hoses, the high pressure, low pressure, let them go. You detach the pump. And then you feed the pump through the back of the engine. You don't need to do anything else. It'll pop out right there. You put the new pump in, reinstall it with the 2 hoses. And I've got some tips on that. It's not as easy as I just made it out to be. Rebolt everything, reattach everything, fill up the fluid again, and hopefully your car whine is gone. All right, so that's a step, and we'll get into the actual job. We need to get into the power steering pump from below, so you need to jack up the car. I've got a jack stand for safety. Take the wheel off, and that'll give you the ability to get up there. I'm already taken off the plastic guard, splash guard, so there are some pins through there, plastic pins. What you should do is just take like a forked screwdriver, if you have it, and just get it into the pin and then pull them out. Okay, there's 4 of those, and there's a little box down there, dust cover, that you remove the same way. Then come up to get access to the power steering pump from above. You need to get rid of the air box. There are there's 2 clamps. So there's one here. There's one over here. Just flip those clamps. Then there are 2 bolts, one at the front, 10 millimeter, one inside in the back. 8mm. I don't know why they do that, but they do. So just remove those, and the box will pop out. To get it out, then you need to do first. Just use a screwdriver flathead, undo the screw there. There's another screw on the other side, and then loosen the hose. From the box to the manifold, and this will just pop out. You could, to get a lot of more flexibility, if you can. Sorry, I'll just reorganize this. If you want to, you can disconnect the connector right here. I didn't. I was trying to get it off. I couldn't. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it in there and deal with the hose. Then just pull the whole box. The top of the box looks like that. There's an air filter inside, so bonus if you want to replace the air filter, do it now. So take the top off, then just lift the box out and put it aside. I should have mentioned as well, there is this hose. No clamp. Just pop it off the box. Next, you want to remove the serpentine belt. That's on the inside of every car. So the serpentine belt is the black thing that runs in the circle. It spins because of the flywheel that comes off of the engine, right? So you get the serpentine belt transfers the rotational energy from the engine into this circuit that the belt runs, and it spins all the components. So power steering, water pump, AC pump, alternator. We're talking about the power steering pump up here in the top left of the car. There is the serpentine belt. I'll use this pry bar to point it out. That is the serpentine belt right there, and then it powers the power steering pump, which is right back in there, and I'll see if I can just point it out. That metal fixture or component back there, right? So then what you want to do is get down below the car, and there are tools you can buy that will release the tension on the serpentine belt, but I just use a pry bar, and what I do is I'll come back. Right. There's the flywheel, and there is this thing called an idle tensioner. That keeps the serpentine belt taut, and I've got my pry bar just wedged into one of the molded openings on the idle tensioner, and then I just lever the tensioner down with my pry bar, and then I hold it in place firmly with one hand, and then I use the other, and I just pull the serpentine belt off. Be very careful. Don't get your finger trapped between any pulley and the serpentine belt. And that just took a second. I was able to use my left hand to pry the idle tensioner down, and use my right hand pull the serpentine belt off. And then you don't need to take it completely off the engine, just unravel it or unwind it from the power steering pump. That's the power steering fluid reservoir. I've got a little hand pump that I just pump into a little bottle down here to discard of properly. I just pump out as much of the fluid as you can. You can use a turkey baster or whatever. I find this is just a little tidier. All right, I'm trying to unbolt the power steering pump from down there, and I'm having a hell of a time. So I've tried a couple things. One, I tried to follow some other web feedback that I got, which said you could put a socket in there and sort of find the bolts and undo them. 2 from the top, maybe 1 from the bottom. I could not do that. I just could not reach those damn bolts. Then in my Haynes manual, it says to pull the windshield wiper arm off the post, and I bought pullers and things like that. I could not get that off. I could probably try harder, but I opted to not do that. So what I did was I needed to do my air conditioning anyway. So I had the filter dryer was installed in there. I did a video on pressurizing my AC system this year. So I'd replaced the filter dryer, recharged my system. So what I did was I took this car in. I had the AC refrigerant vacuumed or recovered out of the car, because what I just took I unbolted the 2 bolts in the top of this thing, the high pressure, low pressure lines, removed the filter, And then what I'm doing now is I am removing the, it's kind of a holder, a harness that keeps the filter dryer in place. It's a real pain in the butt too. You absolutely need a ratcheting wrench, 13, I think it's 13 mm. If you don't have that, you'll never get this thing off. It's just impossible. Okay, so I kind of went nuclear on this, but that's what I had to do. All right, I pulled this filter dryer off of the inside of the car. It's mounted like this on the side of the frame, and you can see there's two posts built into the frame, and this goes in and slots down on the posts, and then there are two nuts that you just screw onto the posts over there. Okay, so that's what the unit looks like. So you have to get the ratcheting screwdriver or wrench because this is really buried in there. So now I'm hoping I can get a wrench in a ratchet in on the 3 bolts around that through that pulley and into the steering pump. I'm just going to stick the camera back here and just see if I can get a good look at the nut or the bolt, I guess, that's in there. I'll put it in slowly. There it is. That's one. It won't focus because the camera is so tight, but there are 3 bolts that look like that at I guess 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. That right in the middle of the screen, you can see I've got an Allen key hex bit stuck into a screw. That screw holds in the hose, this thing here. That's the low pressure hose, and you just you can use an Allen wrench, but you need some torque on the thing. Most Allen wrenches are too short to even get a good torque, so I put that little 5mm bolt in there, and then got a socket wrench on it, and it came right off. I pulled the high pressure line off. It's really carefully machined, so it fits. The hose fits in this little hole very, very, very snugly. So I put a screwdriver in there and then grab the hose from the end out there, and wiggle it, pop right out. It is full of fluid, so you can see I've just got a rag down there just to catch all the drips that are coming out of the hose, and I'll let it just trickle out. I'm going to replace all the fluid anyways. All right, I'm looking at this from below. You can see. I'm just going to zoom in. All right, I'm looking at the power steering pump from below. I'm just going to zoom in. There's the pump way up there. And see if I can zoom in on that. That is the high pressure fluid line that comes from the reservoir. You need to get a wrench onto that that little, I don't know what it is. It's a fitting on on the hose. You just get a wrench on that, and you can see in the middle of the screen the hose is threaded right into the pump. So when you spin that fitting, the pump will the hose will release and come out. I'm down below the car, pointing toward the front there. And what I did was I'm pulling the pump down because I need to get the, let's see if I can point to it. I need to get the high pressure line off. So that's this is the high pressure line there, and it wraps around to the back right there, and there's a nut. I just need to get a wrench on and then twist, and then this high pressure line will come off, and then the pump will drop down. To get this off, you see this right here, that was bolted onto the frame of the car back here. It's just ratcheted out, and then this whole thing will come loose, and then you can just kind of maneuver it down to the bottom of the car and do what I'm doing. All right, I've just got that high pressure line unbolted from the pump, and I'm using a ratcheting wrench. I think it's a 15 millimeter. If it's not, I'll put a note on the video. But the ratcheting wrench makes so much help here because it's you're in a really tight spot, and it just makes it easier. I'm just ratcheting off the high pressure line. You can see I've got a ratcheting wrench, And boy, does this thing make life easy. So if you don't have a set of these, they're just great. And there's open-ended. I'm using the open-ended. There's a closed end on the other side, and you can see how that really makes life easy. A couple little tips while I've got my mind on it. When you're taking out the bolts, the 3 bolts from the pump, it's hard to get the socket down there, and then you can't get your fingers on the bolt to spin it. So what I did, I just put a little socket on the end, and I was able to spin the bolt right off. It took just a few seconds. And then also you need to replace the O-ring on the high pressure line. I can't look at it. It's the small one, the metal one that comes up from the bottom of the car. Also change the O-ring on the low pressure hose. All right, I've already done that. The O-rings, the replacement should come with your steering pump. Mine did, and it was really hard to get on. So what I did is I took a little a bowl of very hot water, left the O-ring in there for a minute, and then it was able to go on real fast. All right, I just unbolted the high pressure line from the steering pump. So the steering pump was down there. I bolted it from below because I could get a wrench on it that way. You can also try to unbolt it from the top. It's just kind of hard because you gotta reach around the back, but whatever way works. And then what you can do is just feed the pump through the back behind the engine, and there's the pump right there. So I can just pull it out now, get it through some of these hoses, and there it is. It's full of fluid, etc. So you're going to get power steering fluid all over the place, but if you drain most of it before, it shouldn't be too bad. So I'll put the new one in now. All right, I did a separate video on taking the pulley off the old pump and putting on the new. So I've done that. I'll link to that video because it's a bit longer than I would want to include in this. So now reverse the whole process. So I'll feed this pump back in on this side over there, and I'll go down under the car and put the high pressure hose back on. So just another tip here, trying to get the high pressure line, which is right in the middle of the screen, right there. Trying to get that high pressure line back in is quite hard. It needs to be like perfectly positioned into the hole. And then you can see the threaded inline bolt needs to be screwed in just so. So what I did is I've done this from the bottom, so I'm laying on my back right now, and I've got the pump positioned here at the bottom of the car, and you can see where my hand comes in. I can get both my hands in from the right and the left, and then I was able to spin the thing on properly. Got a wrench on it and whatnot. So do it from the bottom. And then another 2 tips. If you're tightening the high pressure line from the bottom of the car, don't tighten it down, because what I found is that as I bring the pump back up, it needs to rotate freely on the high pressure line so that you can get it put back into the right spot. When it's put in, then you can tighten up the high pressure line again. All right, and also note the position of the pump on this. Trying to get a picture of that on the bracket. So the pump slides the hub on the outside of the bracket, and the pump itself on the other side of the bracket. So just remember that. Another tip: when you put the pump back in and you bolt it down, don't tighten down any of the bolts too hard. Get it in, and then rotate the socket around between the 3 bolts, and get them in there, more or less even. Okay. And the same tip I said before, I would use a loose socket in your hand just to twist those bolts on, because they go in pretty deep. Replacing the low pressure hose in there. So what I did is I lined up the hose going into the pump, got the bolt in, which is the Allen wrench, And then I tightened down the Allen wrench bolt, you know, to, I don't know, 3-4 millimeters, half an inch. Then I used a little hammer and I tapped the hose into the hole of the pump, okay, and then tightened it off. So I've got the pump bolted in. I've got I've retightened the high pressure line in the back. Remember I said, you know, loosen it so that you can get the pump rotated properly out of the bracket. That's great, but then use your a wrench. It's a 16 millimeter, yeah, to tighten that down. I've got the low pressure Allen bolt put back in. I've got the Serpentine Belt, there it is, reattached properly. If you can't remember, just look at the front of your car. I've got all the hoses reattached, high pressure, low pressure in the back. I've got the 2 bolts. I've got the 2 hoses reattached. Now, I'm quite sure I've got it all. I'm gonna take my power steering fluid and fill this up, and then this is a 2 or 3 step process, because the fluid needs to get pulled into the circuit, and then you need to bleed it, which you do by rotating the wheel and just running the car and letting the fluid circulate through, and you'll see air bubbles popping up in this. Perfectly fine. You don't need to bleed it the way you do brakes or anything to keep vacuums. You just don't have to do that. All right, so I'll get going with that. So reattach the battery and start the car up, and I've put in I probably put in half a liter right now, and it's full, as you can see. But when I start the car up, the pump is going to work, I hope, and it will suck all this fluid through. All right, I'm going to run this. What I noticed is that the pump was whining at the beginning, but now as fluid is getting in there, the whine is going away. It's sounding normal again.